On the night I went into labor, Fu Yanxiu called for water 3 times in my half-sister's room. The next day, before I had even recovered from the postpartum hemorrhage, he couldn't wait to announce, "From today onward, move out of the main courtyard, I demote you from wife to concubine. You can't even give birth to a healthy heir, what use do I have for a wife like you?" The entire household was waiting to see me cry, go mad, and seek death, but I refused to give them what they wanted. Instead, I obediently moved into the dilapidated side courtyard, handed over the household management token, as if I had accepted my fate. Until the day of the palace banquet, my stepsister's pregnant belly became the laughingstock of the entire capital. Because the head of the Imperial Medical Bureau diagnosed it right in front of the emperor, the Marquis of Loyalty and Valor is completely incapable of fathering children. Not even a single healthy heir can be produced. "What use do I have for you as my principal wife?" Fu Yanxiu's furious roar still echoed in my ears. I lay on the delivery bed, drenched in sweat, my fingertips digging deep into my palms, yet nothing could compare to the heart-wrenching agony tearing through my abdomen. An entire night of difficult labor had drained every last ounce of my strength. When I struggled to lift my heavy eyelids, what met my gaze was the cold, indifferent face of Fu Yanxiu. Beside him, my half-sister Zhu Huan. Her hair slightly disheveled and her almond-shaped eyes brimming with a spring-like tenderness, leaned against his chest, smiling softly at me. "I have informed your father and obtained the marriage certificate." He threw a crimson engagement letter before my bed. "From today onward, you are demoted from wife to concubine." Trembling, I picked up the engagement letter. The cinnabar ink was still wet, stinging my eyes. There, side by side, were his name and Zhu Huan's, my half-sister, who just yesterday had come to accompany me during childbirth, now clung to my husband, her clothes in disarray. I forced myself to sit up through the excruciating pain. "Where is my child?" The wet nurse tremblingly brought over a swaddled bundle. The infant's face was pale and ashen, its breath as faint as a wisp of silk. Zhu Huan covered her lips with a light laugh. "The Imperial physician said that you, dear sister, may find it difficult to conceive again in the future. As for this sickly little one," she paused meaningfully, "I fear he may not survive the harsh winter." Fu Yanxiu held Zhu Huan by the waist, his tone icy cold. "The Fu family needs a strong heir. You have always been known for your virtue and should understand what is appropriate. From today onward, move to the side courtyard. This main courtyard will be vacated for Huana to live in." After they left arm in arm, my dowry matron whispered with reddened eyes, "Young lady, you don't know, last night, that seductress in the neighboring chamber, with the master, shamelessly called for water 3 times. I lowered my head to look at the frail child in my arms and suddenly felt a bone-chilling cold. At the moment I was hanging between life and death. My husband was in the throes of passion with my half-sister. Their sounds of pleasure must have drowned out my desperate cries. The entire capital praises the Marquis of Loyalty and Valor for his deep affection and unwavering loyalty. He knelt until the snow on the steps was crushed, all to marry me, a powerless orphan. But now, with my postpartum hemorrhage still unhealed, he can't wait to demote me from wife to concubine. I still remember the day the late emperor bestowed our marriage. Fu Yanxiu, dressed in a moon-white brocade robe with his hair tied up in a jade crown, took my hand before all the court officials. His eyes sparkling like a galaxy. "In this lifetime, I will marry no one but Zhu Yang, and it will be just the 2 of us, forever." Now, however, I stood in the wind, holding my dying child, watching helplessly as my courtyard was draped with glaring red silk. Zhu Huan's personal maid arrogantly directed the servants to hang lanterns. When she saw me, she even rolled her eyes. "Oh, why is the concubine here? This place is full of bad luck, don't ruin the new madam's joy." I dug my fingernails into my palms and demanded sharply, "Who gave you permission to touch my courtyard?" The maid sneered. "The Marquis has ordered that this courtyard be redecorated for the new mistress. As for you," she glanced at the child in my arms, "you'd better hurry and move out with this sickly little thing, miss." Hongxiu rushed over in a panic, supporting my swaying body, her eyes red. "They deliberately sent me away. How could you come out alone?" The servant stood by, watching coldly. not a single one stepping in to stop it. Instead, they whispered among themselves, as if watching a farce. Hongxiu gritted her teeth and helped me up. Let's go find the old madam. She has always doted on you and will surely stand up for you. Yes. There was still my mother-in-law holding the fort in this household. I still remember the day I married into the Marquis's household, when my mother-in-law held my hand with tears in her eyes and said, "Good child, from now on, you are my own daughter." When I had morning sickness, she personally rubbed my back for me. In the cold winter, fearing my feet would freeze, she specifically ordered someone to bury a heating system under the blue bricks. Who in the entire household doesn't know that the young mistress is the old lady's apple of her eye? Untouchable, she will definitely seek justice for me. I tightened the swaddling clothes and, with Hongxiu supporting me, trudged through the snow toward the sea iron hall. Along the way, the servants scattered at the sight of me, as if I were some kind of plague. A young maid secretly slipped me a hand warmer, but the head matron slapped her to the ground. "You wretched girl. Can't you see which way the wind is blowing in this household? You're asking for death." The warm fragrance of Sea Iron Hall washed over me, and for a moment, it felt as though I had returned to the past. But the next moment, I heard my mother-in-law's cheerful voice, "Juana, try this bloodbird's nest quickly. I had it specially rushed here on horseback from the south." I froze in the doorway. Zhu Huan was reclining on the Luohan bed, being fed soup by my mother-in-law, whose eyes were filled with doting affection. When she saw me, Zhu Huan pretended to be startled and shrank into my mother-in-law's arms. "Mother, sister." My mother-in-law turned around and saw me, the kindness on her face instantly freezing into frost. "What are you doing here?" She wiped her hands slowly and deliberately. "Didn't Xianxia tell you? Since you're here, you might as well hand over the keys to the storeroom to Juana. You're weak, so there's no need for you to worry about the trivial matters of the household." Trivial matters? I looked at the mountain of brocade boxes piled up in her room. Those are all congratulatory gifts from various households celebrating the birth of my son. For the past 3 years, it has been my efforts in navigating and managing relationships among the powerful that have barely kept the declining house of Loyalty and Valor maintaining its dignity. Does she truly believe that without my behind-the-scenes arrangements, those high and mighty noblewomen would give her, an old woman without a title, even a shred of respect? I stood before the hall, the wind and snow striking my face. Suddenly, I remembered the scene from my childhood when my grandfather taught me to draw a bow. His rough, large hands enveloped my small ones, the iron-backed bowstring hummed, and the arrow shot through the air, hitting the bullseye 100 paces away. "Yanga, remember?" My grandfather's voice echoed in my ears. "If you can't kill with a single strike, pretend to be a wounded rabbit. First, feign weakness and lie low, wait for the wolf to draw near." He suddenly drew his sword, stab it through the throat again. I touched the short knife my maternal grandfather had given me, hidden in my sleeve. When I looked up, I had already put on a submissive expression. "Yes, your humble servant, will go fetch the key right away." By the time I returned to the main courtyard with the child in my arms, Fu Yanxiu was standing under the corridor. The twilight deepened, and he stood there in a moon-white brocade robe, his hair tied up with a jade crown. His features as exquisite as a painting, still looking just like that young man from years past, his expression so tender it could drown a person. I stepped forward slowly, gently lifting the child in my arms, my voice hoarse. "Husband, the child hasn't been named yet, perhaps a name." He suddenly let out a scornful laugh, the tenderness in his eyes cracking apart, revealing a venomous mockery. "A sickly child who won't live past a year, does it even deserve my attention?" A cold wind swept by, and my fingertips trembled, yet I let out a low, quiet laugh. "It seems my husband's hopes now rest entirely in my half-sister's womb." He didn't even bother to look at me, turning away with a flick of his sleeve. "Move out tomorrow. This courtyard is for Juana to rest during her pregnancy." I stood frozen in place. Every brick and tile in this courtyard had been personally chosen by him for me back then, on the eve of our grand wedding. He once pointed at the newly planted begonia tree and whispered with a light laugh in my ear, "Our Yang loves begonias the most. When the flowers bloom next year, I'll pick a branch to adorn your hair." Now, The begonia tree has been uprooted entirely, replaced by the wisteria swing that Zhu Huan loves most. I suddenly laughed out loud. Fu Yanxiu, do you still remember what you said that year? Kneeling in the heavy snow, he frowned, a flicker of panic flashing in his eyes. I spoke each word as if carving them into my own heart. You said, in this life, I wish only to grow old with iron. If I break this vow, may I be struck by lightning. Before the words had fully faded, a low rumble of thunder rolled across the sky, startling the lanterns under the eaves into violent swaying. Fu Yanxiu's face changed abruptly, and he took a sudden step back as if something filthy had touched him, shouting sharply, preposterous, watching his panicked retreating figure. I lowered my head and kissed my child's cold little cheek. My child, your father is afraid of thunder. Before long, Hongxiu entered holding a fox fur cloak, her eyes brimming with suppressed resentment. Madam, the carriage is ready, the Marquis said. Since you are unwell, it would be best for you to recuperate at the estate. I stroked the wolf-bone dagger and let out a low chuckle. Have they forgotten? My maternal grandfather was the god of war of the northern frontier. I grew up in the military camp, drinking melted snow and resting my head on a scabbard. What the northern blizzards taught me was never to endure humiliation in silence, but rather, killing should be slow, heart removal precise, and when cutting flesh with a dull blade, one must sprinkle hot salt into the wound for the full flavor. Inform the Marquis that I shall be staying at the cunning palace for a while. I gently stroked my child's pale, lifeless face. Tell him Her Majesty the Empress misses the young heir and wishes to see him with her own eyes. Hongxiu stared wide-eyed in shock. Who in the entire capital doesn't know? Before the Empress entered the palace, she was my closest confidant and always quick to defend me. As the carriage passed through Vermilion Bird Street, I lifted a finger and drew back the curtain, letting everyone in the capital see the wife of the Marquis of Loyalty and Valor, holding a frail infant. Her tear-stained cheeks still damp, her slender figure swaying unsteadily in the wind and snow. Sure enough, within less than a month, rumors in the capital spread like wildfire. I heard that the Marquis of Loyalty and Valor favors his concubine over his wife, even ignoring his legitimate son's critical illness. That Zhu family's illegitimate daughter dares to withhold her legitimate sister's tonic medicine even before she's married. What audacity! Poor Lady Marquis. Forced to hide in the palace, too ashamed to even return to her own family, I leaned on the soft couch in the cunning palace, listening to the palace attendants report, a slow smile curling at the corner of my lips. The show has just begun. The day Fu Yanxiu came to fetch me happened to coincide with the emperor dining at the cunning palace. He knelt outside the palace gates for a full hour before the emperor leisurely set down his teacup and said, "Summon him," as he entered the hall. He stumbled slightly, nearly falling. I lowered my gaze and pursed my lips, while the child in my arms let out a timely whimper, drawing the empress's sympathetic glance as she handed over a warm stove. Actually, long before he arrived, the emperor had summoned me alone. A bright yellow memorial was pushed before me, the vermilion annotations glaring. The words favoring a concubine and destroying the wife were still stained with fresh ink. The emperor tapped his finger on that spot. Your maternal grandfather's entire family was loyal and heroic. I promised to look after you. Now, how do you want me to handle this? I held the child and bowed deeply. Your Majesty, there is no discord between me and the Marquis. It is only that Her Majesty the Empress, out of concern for me, invited me to stay in the palace for a while. As for the rumors outside, the Empress chimed in at the right moment. Your Majesty, Xianxia has always been a decisive one since she was young. Let her handle this matter herself. So at this moment, the Emperor glanced at the kneeling Fu Yanxiu with a half-smile. I recall it was you who knelt in the snow, insisting on marrying the eldest daughter of the Zhu family. The white jade thumb ring tapped crisply on the table. And now, for the sake of a concubine, you've stirred up a storm throughout the city. Marquis Zhongyong, you've done well. A single light-hearted sentence turned Fu Yanxiu's face ashen. From then on, no matter how much my half-sister stirred up trouble, she would forever remain a concubine unworthy of the grand stage. In the carriage on the way back to the mansion, Fu Yanxiu grabbed my wrist, his eyes seething with venomous hatred. You wretch, how dare you? I gently stroked the bruise on my wrist, smiling brightly. Be careful with your words, Marquis. The Emperor just said he would send a royal physician to check on my well-being every day. Zhu Huan ultimately gave up the main courtyard. According to the nanny, she smashed 3 sets of tea sets in her room. My mother-in-law's gaze at me was as sharp as a poisoned needle, yet in front of all the servants in the mansion, I leisurely savored the Yunwu tea newly bestowed by the Emperor. I had Hongxiu take the young heir back to his room to rest first. Ignoring their gazes, I sat down directly. Sister, why are you still performing the concubine's bow? I blew away the tea foam and waited until her legs trembled from squatting before saying, rise. Fu Yanxiu immediately rushed forward to support her, turning to glare at me angrily. Vicious woman, I have already been merciful by keeping you in the position of the principal wife, yet you dare to humiliate Huana. Zhu Huan stroked her belly and looked at me with a light laugh. Sister, I am already with child. The Imperial physician says there is an 80% chance this one is a boy. The future hope of the Marquis's household rests entirely on this. I let out a cold laugh. No wonder they all acted so high and mighty after returning to the estate. I was just about to retort, but then, Hongxiu stumbled in, her face swollen on one side. Madam, the young master has been. I sprang to my feet. What happened to Honga? A burst of laughter came from the backyard. 7 or 8 maidservants surrounded a young man in brocade robes, who was tossing my Honga into the air as if he were a ball. Little sickly one. Catch it. A gleam of malicious triumph flashed in the child's eyes as he deliberately let go. Bang. Honga fell heavily into the snow, his little face instantly flushing a deep, purplish red, as I rushed over. My fingertips brushed against Honga's burning forehead. He was running a fever. In the palace, I had carefully nurtured my child for over a month, but now he couldn't even cry out, only emitting faint whimpers like a kitten. Hongxiu, I thrust the token into her hands. Go fetch the Imperial physician. One by one, silver needles pierced into Honga's small, purplish body. I stared at the physician's furrowed brow, my nails digging deep into my palms. Suddenly, the beaded curtain was roughly pushed aside. Fu Yanxiu entered with a large crowd of people, the servants holding lanterns that illuminated the dim inner room as brightly as daylight. Madam, the young master needs to rest quietly. The elderly physician wiped the sweat from his forehead, his voice lowered to a whisper. I glared at the boy behind him. The child was only about 8 or 9 years old, dressed in fine silk and a jade belt. Xianxia, the child doesn't know any better. Fu Yanxiu nudged him instead. He heard his little brother was sick and insisted on coming to see him. The boy grinned, suddenly pulling a cloth bundle from his sleeve. Little brother, I brought you something delicious. He suddenly shook the cloth bag open, and a handful of walnuts clattered onto Honga's face. The hard edges of the shells left faint streaks of blood on the child's tender cheeks. The blood in my body instantly froze. Honga is allergic to nuts. Even a tiny bit can cause a full-body rash and difficulty breathing. I lunged forward like a madwoman, only to have Fu Yanxiu grab my wrist and pull me back. Xianxia, Mingyi is only 9 years old. Children play rough without knowing their limits. Why must you take it so seriously? Play rough. My voice was hoarse and terrifying. Throwing a child with a high fever into the snow is playing rough. Smashing walnuts into his face is playing rough. Zhu Huan leaned against the doorframe and sneered. Sister, in your current deranged state, do you still have even a shred of the dignity befitting the mistress of the Marquis's household? She suddenly caressed her flat belly. Ah, it's all thanks to your husband thinking of you. Hongxiu, bring the family discipline. I abruptly drew the wolf-bone knife from under the pillow, its cold gleam flashing, forcing everyone to retreat to the front hall, no matter whose bastard child this is. Today he hurt my Honga, and I will make sure he crawls out of here. Zhu Huan suddenly let out a sharp cry, clutching her stomach. Husband, our child. Everyone immediately fell into chaos. The mother-in-law harshly scolded. You poisonous woman. Are you trying to anger Huana to death and cut off the Marquis's lineage? Only then did Fu Yanxiu lean down and whisper softly in my ear. Xianxia, your body is damaged and it will be difficult for you to conceive again, this child. He looked at the young man beside him. I've carefully selected him from the clan to be adopted under your name. So you'll have someone to rely on in the future. Clang, I swept my hand, knocking the teacup to the floor, the shattered porcelain splattering onto Fu Yanxiu's boots. Only then did I see clearly that the young man's eyes and brows bore a striking resemblance to his. Now, seeing how they protect their own, my heart is filled with suspicion. My Hong'er is struggling between life and death. Yet they have long been scheming for my child to die. Suddenly, that wretched creature broke free and pointed at the inner chamber, screaming, "Even the Imperial physician said you are destined to have no heirs. That sickly child should have long since." Slap, I raised my hand to strike. But my mother-in-law suddenly shoved me aside, her armor scraping across my cheek as she shielded the child behind her. Warm blood dripped down my chin. Yet I saw the child make a throat-slitting gesture toward me. Just then, the Imperial physician stumbled out of the room. "Madam, the young master. I fear he may not survive the night." Seizing the moment, Fu Yanxiu declared loudly, "Since you remain obstinate, this child shall be recorded under your name and raised by Huana. I have given you all the dignity you deserve." As they escorted Zhu Huan away, the child suddenly turned back and mouthed to me, "You're next." I collapsed before Hong'er's bed, listening to his increasingly faint breaths. Outside the window, Fu Yanxiu was gently comforting Zhu Huan. "Don't be afraid, once that little wretch dies, Mingyi will rightfully become the legitimate heir." I lowered my head, looking at the blood holes in my palm made by my nails, and suddenly laughed. "Excellent. Since you want to play, I'll play a big game with you. My Hong'er is dead." I held him and sat through the night. The next day, just as dawn was breaking, the courtyard gate was violently kicked open. Zhu Huan was dressed in a deep red, gold-woven jacket and skirt, the hairpin in her hair swaying so brightly it was almost blinding. As soon as she entered, she held a handkerchief to her nose, as if there were something filthy in the room. "Sister, please accept my condolences," she said with a smile on her lips, yet her face was full of smugness. "The Marquis is busy and cannot spare the time. He specifically instructed that the funeral be kept simple. After all," she suddenly leaned in close and whispered in my ear, "this little bastard was suffering while alive. Better to die early and be reborn sooner." I sat through the night in silence, my tears long since dried. Now, I simply gently combed the fine, soft hair on Hong'er's forehead, seeing that I paid her no mind. Zhu Huan let out a cold laugh and strode straight to the dressing table, snatching up the household token in one swift motion. "From now on, there's no need for you to trouble yourself with the affairs of this household," she said, deliberately straightening her posture. "After all, the future legitimate heir of the Marquis's estate is right here with me." Hongxiu trembled with rage, about to speak, but I raised my hand to stop her and said calmly, "Hongxiu, go fetch Hong'er's mourning clothes." Zhu Huan was taken aback, then let out a sharp laugh. "What, does my sister still intend to hold a grand funeral?" She abruptly overturned the long cold medicine bowl beside her. "The Marquis said, a cursed child who died young, just dig a pit anywhere in the mass grave and bury it." I slowly lifted my head. "Zhu Huan." Zhu Huan suddenly fell silent, her eyes fixed on what I held in my hand. A blood-stained pair of scissors was pressed against her swollen belly. "Tell me." I leaned close to her pale face. "Will these scissors draw blood first, or will the lump of flesh in your belly hit the ground first?" Suddenly, chaotic footsteps sounded outside the door. Fu Yanxiu rushed in with the household servants, but I had already put away the scissors. "Marquis," Zhu Huan cried out, throwing herself into his arms, "this poisonous woman tried to kill our child." I slowly stood up and walked over to them. "Do you think your belly will make it safely to the day of delivery?" Her face instantly turned deathly pale. After Hong'er's funeral was hastily concluded, before the ashes of the paper offerings had even fully dispersed, I was driven to the most remote rain-listening pavilion in the Marquis's estate. The courtyard had long fallen into disrepair, with spiderwebs clinging to every corner of the eaves, as Hongxiu packed the trunks with tears in her eyes. I gazed at the half-withered crabapple tree in the courtyard and smiled. Back then, Fu Yanxiu had said, "When the flowers bloom next year, I'll pin them in your hair." Now, his words had come true in a twisted way. After seizing the household authority token, Zhu Huan couldn't wait to flaunt her newfound power everywhere. She had altered the mansion's rules beyond recognition. She abolished the morning and evening greetings, dismissed the night patrols and guards, and even replaced the kitchen procurement staff with her maternal cousins. In less than half a month, the Marquis's residence was thrown into chaos. This morning, the kitchen didn't even have any rice. Hongxiu returned with an empty food box, stomping her feet in anger. Auntie Zhu pushed her cousin into managing the procurement, and that gambler ended up losing all the silver. I leaned against the grape trellis, flipping through the account book. What about the stables? Even worse. Hongxiu lowered her voice. The Marquis's favorite horse, Xiaoya Bai, was fed moldy hay and is now foaming at the mouth. I couldn't help but laugh. Thanks to her commotion, the already depleted treasury could hardly withstand a few more days of such turmoil. In the blink of an eye, it was just a few days before my mother-in-law's 60th birthday. I had long been meticulously prepared. The Suzhou embroiderers had readied the longevity-patterned brocade half a year in advance. Lychees from Lingnan were transported day and night to the capital on iceboats, and even the opera troupe was specially invited from Yangzhou. Now that she holds the reins of the household, she claims there is a shortage of funds and, with a wave of her hand, has replaced everything. Hongxiu found out that the tea used for the birthday banquet was actually moldy old stock. The performers were a makeshift troupe gathered from the pleasure quarters. I closed the ledger, my fingertip lightly tracing a page as I fell into thought. It recorded the 3,000 taels of silver my mother-in-law had borrowed last year, listed as incense money, but in reality, suddenly, the courtyard gate was violently kicked open. Zhu Huan charged at me like a street shrew. Zhu Yang. She slammed an account book in front of me. You deliberately squandered all the treasury silver before handing over the household management to me, didn't you? How heartless you are. I didn't even glance at her, leisurely savoring the bird's nest in my hand. She grew even more furious. How dare you still eat bird's nest? You've emptied the treasury with your indulgence. I laughed. This blood nest swallow is a top-grade Imperial gift, far more precious than those moldy old stocks in the Marquis's treasury, yet she couldn't even tell the difference. It seems my concubine mother truly never taught her the skill of discerning quality goods. Would you like to go ask mother-in-law? My fingertip traced the account book. For instance, this 3,000 tael deficit from last December. Zhu Huan suddenly froze. Every page of the account books of the loyal and brave Marquis's household over these years is soaked with my blood and sweat. All the fine clothes and sumptuous food enjoyed by everyone in the household, which of them isn't sustained by the fields, estates, and shops from my dowry? Of course, she knows nothing of this. All these years, my mother-in-law has been using the Marquis's money to lend at high interest, and the profits have all gone to cover the gambling debts of her nephew from her maiden family. Now that I no longer provide subsidies, she actually wants to pin the blame on me. When Fu Yanxiu returned to the mansion, he happened to witness Zhu Huan clutching her mother-in-law and wailing, "Even the tea leaves for the birthday banquet are not prepared. Where on earth did all that money go?" The mother-in-law slapped her and shouted, "Shut up. When Xianxia was in charge, nothing went wrong. How is it that as soon as the authority was handed over to you, so many problems have arisen?" I watched coldly as they fought among themselves. How could Zhu Huan, a mere concubine, have any personal savings? My mother-in-law's money-lending business was conducted with utmost secrecy, however. Having previously managed the treasury, I still managed to uncover some clues. Fu Yanxiu listened for a while and finally understood what they were arguing about. With a stern face, he asked Zhu Huan, "How much is missing from the treasury?" Zhu Huan seemed to have grasped a lifeline, clutching his sleeve tightly, her voice sharp. 20,000 taels of silver are gone. That's the entire year's expenses of the Marquis's household. Fu Yanxiu had originally thought it was just a small amount. But upon hearing this figure, his face instantly turned pale. "Mother, where has all the money gone?" his mother stammered, her eyes darting. She suddenly pointed at me, who was drinking tea nearby, as if she had found a scapegoat. "Xianxia has a generous dowry. She used to cover the expenses before. But now, after a long tug-of-war with her mother-in-law, Zhu Huan knew the old woman was in the wrong, but she also understood that the money was most likely gone for good. Hearing her say this, Zhu Huan immediately caught on and chimed in. Exactly, husband. As long as sister produces the dowry list, everything will be easily resolved. I let out a cold laugh. Now that I don't even have the authority to manage the household, why should I use my dowry to fill this hole? Zhu Huan immediately put on a virtuous face. We're all part of the Marquis's household. What's yours is mine, and what's mine is yours. For you to speak like this, sister, is far too distant. My mother-in-law also chimed in with righteous indignation. Exactly, Xianxia. I remember those shops you have on East Street. Any one of them brings in enough in a year to cover the entire household's expenses. I took a slow, deliberate sip of tea and did not respond. Seeing this, Fu Yanxiu immediately assumed the air of the head of the household and made the final decision. Then it's settled. Hand over the dowry list to Huana for verification as soon as possible. I tapped my fingers lightly on the table twice and suddenly smiled. I heard you intend to send Mingyi to my family's private school. When Fu Yanxiu heard me mention the Fang family's private school, his eyes immediately lit up. I know that child has reached the age for schooling. But the Fu family comes from a military background. What kind of scholarly heritage could they possibly have? They've been worrying about the child's education lately. Moreover, in recent months, I've discovered that the child's origins are unclear, yet his resemblance to Fu Yanxiu and Zhu Huan in the eyes and brows forces me to remain wary. The Fang clan school, run by my maternal grandfather's family, is overseen by the great Confucian scholar Chen Sheng, making it highly sought after by the nobility of the capital. With seats being extremely difficult to obtain, he was overjoyed. You've finally understood my sincere intentions toward you and are willing to accept Mingyi. It was only then that I finally turned the question back to Fu Yanxiu. Does the Marquis know that last month, the Chief Grand Secretary himself came to our door with lavish gifts, just to secure a seat for his prodigy grandson? Yet Scholar Chen didn't even let them through the gate. He couldn't wait. If you speak up, the Fang family will surely give your general's mansion this face. Only then did I say calmly, if the elders of the Fang family knew that I still have to use my dowry to support the Fu family, what would they think? With one sentence, I shut them down on the spot. I let out a scornful laugh. My mother-in-law was furious and still wanted to point at me and scold. You shameless woman who has no respect for your elders. Mother-in-law, I calmly interrupted her. My husband probably doesn't know yet. Does he? You took all the reward money he earned from fighting on the battlefield, as well as the tuition fees from his student days, and used them to lend out at high interest, didn't you? What? Fu Yanxiu suddenly turned his head, glaring at his mother-in-law. You actually dared to lend money at high interest in the capital. Don't you know that officials' family members lending at high interest can be impeached? Are you trying to ruin me? In the dead silence of the room, the corner of my lips lifted slightly. The day before the birthday banquet, Madam. The old madam has recovered most of the loan money from the southern part of the city this morning. I was sitting in the courtyard, basking in the sun, when Hongxiu hurried over, lowering her voice discreetly. I heard that the Liu family suddenly ran out of money to keep their business going, and they were surrounded by merchants who couldn't get their goods. My fingers paused, and I let out a cold laugh. My mother-in-law was finally afraid. With the birthday banquet approaching, invitations from various households were flying in like snowflakes. They have no other choice now but to take this step. I asked Hongxiu, how is Zhu Huan doing? Hongxiu curled her lips. She's busy taking inventory of the storeroom. This morning, I even heard her scolding the cook, saying that longevity banquets shouldn't use green-stemmed rice, it's too costly. I gently stroked the secret letter sent by Xianxia hidden in my sleeve. This birthday banquet was destined to be anything but peaceful. The next day, the main gate of the Marquis's residence was wide open. Zhu Huan, dressed in bright red and adorned with a head full of jingling pearls and jade, stood under the corridor to greet the guests, looking just like a strutting, flamboyant pheasant. Please come in, Madam Deputy Minister. She greeted the guests with her 5-month pregnant belly, while I stood behind her watching coldly. Then I saw Xianxia ride her horse straight up to the steps, and with a sharp crack of her whip, she sent the teacup Zhu Huan had offered flying. She dismounted, not even glancing at Zhu Huan, and rushed over to grab my hand. Dear sister, Have these petty people mistreated you? Zhu Huan's smile froze on her face. And immediately, whispers came from the maids behind her. The daughter of a military family is so wild. They seem to have forgotten that their mistress is also a concubine-born daughter from a military family. Upon hearing this, Zhu Huan's expression grew even more unpleasant. I let out a light laugh, ignoring her, and took Xianxia's arm as we headed toward the Listening Rain Pavilion. As we walked, Xianxia swung the whip in her hand and complained on my behalf. She's already overstepped her bounds, and you're just going to take it like that. I clasped her hand in return. My husband told everyone that I was grieving the loss of our child, which is why I let Aunt Xu handle the banquet arrangements. I pulled her along, quickening my pace. Never mind about her. We have urgent matters to attend to. Once we reached Tingyu Pavilion, as soon as I closed the door behind us, Xianxia immediately dropped her playful demeanor. Brother Yian was rescued by a hunter at the bottom of the cliff. But his right leg is crippled, and his arm is injured too. She took out half of a black iron token from her bosom. This was found among the battlefield remains. Look at the inscription on the back. The token felt cold to the touch, and on its back, the character Fu was stained with a dark red bloodstain. A metallic sweetness surged in my throat, and the bloody battle from 3 years ago suddenly tore through my vision. My grandfather, pierced by 7 arrows, still held his ground at Eagle's Beak Cliff, while my cousin fell into the abyss protecting the grain supply route, and Fu Yanxiu and my father coincidentally arrived with reinforcements 3 days late. The hunter said that Brother Yian got caught on a tree branch when he fell and saw Fu family's private soldiers on the cliff finishing off the wounded. Your Fang family army was stabbed in the back by your own people. Xianxia is the younger sister of General Zheng from the northern desert. 3 years ago, General Zheng was leading a patrol outside the capital and missed that earth-shattering battle. My maternal grandfather died on the battlefield, and my cousin fell off a cliff. According to the account my father and Fu Yanxiu gave upon returning to the capital, they had led reinforcements to escape the danger, then drove the northern Zhao army back step by step, forcing them to cede a city before the war finally ended. After that, my father was appointed by the emperor as the Grand General. Fu Yanxiu was therefore granted the title of nobility by the emperor for his military achievements. From that day on, he was no longer mocked by the nobles in the capital as a useless heir who only had a title. I clenched the token in my hand and sneered. Very well. In the front hall, the gilded candlesticks illuminated the entire room with brilliance. The Grand Princess sat upright in the main seat, her armored fingers lightly tapping the teacup. Though she wore a proper, faint smile, a chill of 3 parts frost gathered in the depths of her eyes. In such a gathering of distinguished nobles, to allow a concubine to sit beside the head of the household, the Marquis of Loyalty and Valus estate truly grows more and more ignorant of propriety. My father, Zhu Daoming, remained completely unaware, still holding the demeanor of a second-rank military official as he clinked cups with the Vice Minister of War. Back in the northern deserts, the snow was waist-deep, and I alone charged straight through to take the enemy general's head. The smell of wine sprayed onto the other man's face, and the vice minister forced a smile as he leaned back. Aunt Lu, wearing an overstepping brocade jacket, was deliberately raising her voice as she surrounded several titled ladies. Our master loves Snow Peak Emerald the most, saying it tastes even better than the blood tea from the northern deserts. The Duchess of England suddenly stood up and stepped aside. I must excuse myself to freshen up. The other 2 ladies immediately followed her lead, accidentally knocking over the teacup Aunt Lu had offered. The scalding tea splashed onto her shoes, yet no one paused to spare a glance, amidst the shimmering jewels and swaying hairpins. The noble women exchanged knowing glances. The lady of Yongchang County covered her face with a round fan and chuckled softly. At the birthday banquet of the mother-in-law of the legitimate daughter, it's the concubine and the illegitimate daughter who steal the show, General Zhu's family style, TSK. This sparked a wave of hushed whispers. I heard the real Marchioness is fasting in the backyard. The illegitimate sister climbed over the legitimate sister to rise in status. And the concubine wears bright red to greet guests. This family is truly chaotic. Zhu Huan remained completely unaware, still bustling around the hall with her 5-month pregnant belly. She had just presented the teacup to the usually gentle Lady Angua, who only took a sip before frowning. This tea. Could it have gotten damp? Hearing her words, all the noblewomen in the hall, who had just taken a polite sip of the newly served Snow Peak Emerald, froze in unison. The tea that Aunt Lu had just praised to the heavens indeed looked clear and bright in the cup, but upon tasting, it was like aged rainwater mixed with rust, so astringent it numbed the tongue, and carrying a hint of mildew. This tea is rather unique. The Duchess of Angua forced a smile as she set down her teacup. Zhu Huan's hand, which had been pouring tea for her, froze in place, her eyelashes trembling slightly, clearly flustered, amidst the silence filling the room. Concubine Lu hurriedly stepped forward to smooth things over. Ladies, you may not know, but this is the tea often enjoyed by the soldiers of the northern frontier. The Marquis of Loyalty and Valor has been a family of loyal and righteous men for generations. The Marquis himself says that drinking this tea is like witnessing the unyielding spirit of the borderlands. Fu Yanxiu nodded repeatedly in agreement. The mother-in-law also quickly signaled to Zhu Huan, yes, yes. Hurry and refill the princess's cup. And so, this page was barely turned over. After that, one delicacy after another was served like flowing water. The scallion braised sea cucumber was glossy and plump, the hibiscus chicken slices were tender as congealed fat, and the lotus leaf steamed pork exuded a delicate fragrance. Gradually, laughter and music once again filled the banquet. I know all of this was Fu Yanxiu's doing, after all. Last night when he discovered that the banquet menu was filled with cheap goods, his furious roar could be heard all the way to the listening rain pavilion. With a budget of 30 taels per table, you dare to use moldy dried goods. Do you think my loyal and brave Marquis's estate is a beggar's den? In the end, he had no choice but to spend a fortune to hire chefs from the Spring Breeze Pavilion and hastily replace the opera troupe with the Longevity Joy troupe. What a pity, though. Some things, he simply cannot change. When Zhu Huan once again recommended a dish, the Lady of Angua nodded slightly, yet her silver chopsticks only lightly tapped the edge of the plate. The timing of the heat is just right. The lady seated nearby covered her face with a fan and whispered, "It is indeed fresh, but the abalone sauce is too cleverly seasoned, lacking the mellow richness of a slow-cooked home-style dish." The swift flames and roaring stoves of the Spring Breeze Pavilion ultimately lacked the gentle, simmering refinement of aristocratic heritage, and the subtle differences were still discerned by the distinguished guests present. On the stage, the Shoshi troupe was performing Magu Presents Longevity, the sound of drums and music just barely drowning out the whispers among the guests. Truly a nouveau riche, even the banquet has to be outsourced. I heard the troupe on stage was replaced at the last minute, though not perfect. There were no major mistakes either. On the other side, Fu Yanxiu had just caught his breath and was about to raise his glass for a toast. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the hall. The son of the Deputy Minister of War collapsed straight to the ground, overturning the entire table of cups, plates, and bowls. Immediately, gasps of shock erupted throughout the hall, and a young lady clutched her stomach, curling into a ball. Even the Princess Dowager turned deathly pale. Leaning against the table edge, "Summon the Imperial Physician. Quickly, summon the Imperial Physician." The entire hall of guests erupted in screams one after another, startling all the on-duty Imperial physicians from the Imperial Medical Bureau, who arrived in a group of over 20. It must be the rice that's the problem. After carefully examining the food present, the Imperial physicians reached the same conclusion. All 38 banquet tables had been served with aged, moldy rice. Aflatoxin has already entered the organs. They must immediately take detoxifying decoctions and rest for over a month. My mother-in-law, who had been sitting beside the princess, was now in a state of extreme panic, her hair disheveled as she supported the princess. "Your Highness, please see clearly. Could it be that the Imperial physicians made a mistake? This old woman also ate the food, so why am I unharmed?" Only then did everyone realize that everyone in the loyal and brave Marquis's household showed no signs of poisoning. Before the words had even finished, a torrent of furious curses flooded the hall. What kind of heart does your Marquis's household have? To serve moldy rice to the clan relatives, impossible. Zhu Huan collapsed to the ground. The household eats this rice every day, it can't be poisoned. Her slender, sharp fingernail pointed at the cook who had been dragged out by the princess's personal guards. It must be her. Yes, it must be this wretched servant who poisoned the food. The cook immediately fell to her knees with a thud. I'm innocent, my lord. Please see the truth. The concubine, to save money, forced us to mix 3 parts of moldy rice into the new rice every day. This time, for the birthday banquet, it was even worse. She made us mix in a full 7 parts. The apprehended kitchen procurement steward also kowtowed frantically. This mixed rice has been consumed daily by everyone in the household, and they have long since become desensitized, but the esteemed guests are of noble status. Accustomed to only the finest food and drink in their daily lives, how could they possibly endure such poison? In the deathly silence of the hall, the Grand Princess took the antidote broth presented by the Imperial physician and slowly rose to her feet with the support of her maids. Her face pale, she swept her gaze over the Fu family members collapsed on the floor. What a fine, loyal and valiant Marquis estate, truly rotten to the core, supported by his servants. The Vice Minister of War trembled as he pointed a finger. Loyal and valiant Marquis, at tomorrow's morning court, I will surely submit a memorial denouncing you. Disregarding human life, poisoning one's own kin, how is such behavior any different from that of beasts? They must be severely punished. Investigate thoroughly. A tide of voices in agreement and condemnation surged forth. But Fu Yanxiu had no time to concern himself with this now, for a line of Yamen runners filed in, surrounding everyone present. Madame Fu, the capital prefect, ignored the chaos strewn across the floor. His gaze fixed on the mother-in-law who was trying to shrink into the crowd, her face ashen. You lent money at exorbitant interest rates to exploit the common people, and when collecting debts, you allowed your men to commit violence, driving Liu the peddler to hang himself in shame and widow Li to drown herself in the river to prove her innocence. 2 lives lost in a single day. You are hereby arrested and will be brought to trial immediately. The mother-in-law let out a wail and collapsed to the ground. It's a false accusation. They were the ones who couldn't bear it. I only wanted my silver back. Wanted your silver back. The capital prefect sneered, waving for the bailiffs to step forward and seize her. Liu's shop was smashed to pieces by your men, and even the silver lock of the infant in swaddling clothes was snatched to pay off the debt. Widow Li's loom was chopped up for firewood. How were she and her orphaned child supposed to survive? Now the bodies of the victims are laid at the gates of the capital prefecture, their blood-written pleas weeping with every word, and the entire city is in an uproar. If I don't arrest you immediately, I fear this Marquis's estate will be trampled flat by the tide of public fury. Fu Yanxiu's vision went dark, and he nearly collapsed. Lord Marquis Fu. The capital prefect finally seemed to notice him, his tone laced with sarcasm. Your household truly knows how to mix celebrations with mourning. What a lively affair. You'd better think about how to save yourself first. The impeachment memorials from the censorate, accusing you of failing to manage your family and allowing your mother to commit violence, are probably already piled high on His Majesty's desk. Before the words had fully faded, the Marquis's steward stumbled in. Crawling and scrambling, his voice choked with tears as he cried out, My lord, a disaster has struck. The front gate is completely surrounded by an angry mob. Rotten vegetables and rotten eggs are flying so thick you can't even see the plaque, and there are several groups of censors from the censorate waiting right at the door, saying they want to question you on the spot. Fu Yanxiu could no longer spare a thought for his mother rolling on the ground or for Zhu Huan, whose face had turned ashen as she screamed uncontrollably. Amid the chaos, curses, and wails, he nearly stumbled as he fled in disgrace through the side gate. In the days that followed, he tried every means to salvage the situation. Yet for several days in a row, he found no one willing to help. Former colleagues who once called him brother either avoided him or dealt with him insincerely. Meanwhile, the memorials impeaching him poured into the palace like a relentless blizzard in the depths of winter. Growing even fiercer, accuse loyal and brave Marquis Fu Yanxiu of lax household management, allowing his mother to commit murder, driving good citizens to their deaths, thus failing to live up to the emperor's grace. Accuse him of failing to maintain order within his inner chambers. Permitting his concubine to poison noble relatives and distinguished officials with moldy rice, his intentions are worthy of death. In the end, we have reached the point of utter desperation. Fu Yanxiu finally set aside his pitiful pride and came begging at my door. Because I received the invitation sent by the princess 2 days ago, the Flower Festival is an annual grand feast personally hosted by the princess. Inviting all the nobles and distinguished families of the capital, its purpose self-evident. It is not only a celebration of spring but also a silent declaration of power and influence. This invitation, for me, is an opportunity. For some, it is the last lifeline. It had only been a few days, yet his eyes were sunken, and his stubble was thick and dark. Xianxia, the palace banquet, the invitation from the Princess Royal. Could you take me along? Now, I may be on leave at home, but many old friends and acquaintances will be attending. Just let me in, mingle a bit, and the situation is sure to turn around. The censorate, his words choked in his throat, because Hongxiu walked over with a bucket of water for the flowers and directly splashed it all at his feet. My voice remained calm and steady. You jest, my lord. At this moment, the memorials impeaching you could likely cover the entire Golden Luan Hall. How could I dare to bring you along to disturb the princess's enjoyment on such a precarious occasion? Moreover, I leaned in slightly, lowering my voice. Have you forgotten how Hong'er was lost? What state of mind do you think I should be in, to take your arm and step into the Qianglin garden? Fu Yanxiu's face instantly turned as pale as paper, yet he could not utter a single word, leaving only despair in his eyes and a hint of shame and anger at being exposed. He staggered back a step. Bumping into the trunk of a crabapple tree, shaking off a few withered leaves that fell bleakly onto his shoulders, I turned away without looking at him again, speaking only to Hongxiu. See the guest out. In the future, don't let just anyone through the door. After that, he dared not come again. So he urged Zhu Huan to send a heartfelt invitation to a family banquet in their father's name. The vermilion invitation was edged with gaudy gold trim. Opening it revealed Zhu Huan's awkward and affected handwriting, the words dripping with a condescending tone of reunion. I held the invitation, feeling nothing but irony. It was nothing more than a trap, however. I had already planned to visit the Zhu residence again. On the day of the banquet, I made no effort to keep a low profile. 8 sturdy servants brought by the Fang family cleared the way, with 2 maidservants flanking each side, though the ceremonial procession was simple. Its presence was imposing. The banquet was set in a waterside pavilion, with dishes that were exquisitely prepared. Zhu Huan kept serving Fu Yanxiu, but her eyes kept darting toward me. Fu Yanxiu was visibly unsettled, spilling his drink several times. After several rounds of drinks, the show finally began. Zhu Huan suddenly pressed her hand to her temple, complaining in a delicate voice that she felt stifled, and asked Fu Yanxiu to accompany her to the garden for some fresh air. Fu Yanxiu, as if granted a reprieve, hastily rose to assist her. The two of them, playing their parts in perfect harmony, soon left arm in arm, leaving the entire table and my father and me in an awkward and heavy silence. I set down the silver chopsticks and wiped the corner of my mouth. What was bound to come has finally arrived. Xianxia, the Marquis's household is now in a precarious state. No matter how many faults Yanxiu may have, he is still your husband. You must understand the principle that when one prospers, all prosper. When one falls, all fall. The old retainers of the Fang family still hold some influence both in the court and among the common people. Now is the time for you to step forward and mediate. Father, I raised my eyes, my gaze clear and sharp as I stared at him. When he favored his concubine over his wife, when he allowed Zhu Huan to cause the death of my Hong'er, did he ever consider that I was his wife? Now that his grand mansion is about to collapse, he suddenly remembers this tattered banner of mine, expecting me to use the goodwill left by my maternal grandfather to patch the holes in his sinking ship. Since when has the world ever operated on such logic? He spun around sharply, his gaze filled with anger at my defiance. Foolish, How can the petty squabbles of the inner household be compared to the rise and fall of the family, if the Marquis's estate falls? You will be nothing but a divorced woman. How will you stand in society then? And what good will the Fang family gain from it? I slowly rose to my feet, walking toward him step by step, my voice low but each word striking like a nail. Father, you keep saying that husband and wife are one, sharing both glory and loss. Do you truly believe that yourself? Yet I wonder, back then at Eagle's Beak Cliff in the northern desert, when you and my dear husband faced my gravely wounded grandfather and my brother Yian, whose fate was unknown, which glory and which shared fate were you thinking of then? Father's pupils suddenly contracted, his face twitching slightly. Xianxia, your father truly did his best back then. Are you still blaming me? Before the words had fully faded, I abruptly extended my arm, accurately grasping the long spear from the weapon rack behind me, with a flick of my wrist. The spear tip sliced through the heavy air, emitting a hum as it pointed straight ahead. Father's pupils suddenly contracted, his face filled with shock and disbelief. You, please enlighten me, father, I sharply interrupted, saying no more. With a step forward, I twisted my waist and thrust the spear straight toward his face. He was, after all, a seasoned veteran of the battlefield. In haste, he immediately grabbed another long spear to block. Clang! A sharp metallic clash rang out, causing the bowls and dishes on the table to hum and vibrate. My assault did not cease. The spear moved with my body, slashing, sweeping, thrusting, and lifting, each move fierce and cunning, completely unlike the graceful techniques expected of a lady from the inner chambers. At first, he could barely manage to parry, but the more we fought, the more alarmed he became, fine beads of cold sweat beginning to form on his temples. He clearly never imagined that his seemingly gentle and obedient daughter could conceal such a formidable skill. Clang! Another heavy clang. My spear shaft pressed precisely against the 7-inch mark of his blade, and with a sudden burst of force, his hands stung with intense pain, nearly losing his grip. Staggering back 2 steps before steadying himself, his breath already ragged, he looked at me as if seeing a strange monster. Gasping for air, his words came out broken. You. When did you learn such? I holstered my gun and stood tall. My grandfather always said, the children of the Fang family never retreat from battle. The phrase deserting in the face of battle seared into his heart like a red-hot branding iron. A flash of murderous intent, sharp as a viper's strike, flickered in his father's eyes before vanishing. His fingers tightened around the rifle, veins bulging on the back of his hand, as if completely oblivious to the momentary threat. I stepped forward without hesitation, reached out, and firmly took the rifle that belonged to him from his slightly loosened grip. With 2 long spears held in hand, I turned and walked toward the door, my back straight and unwavering. Reaching the doorway, I paused but did not look back, leaving only a cold, resolute statement. What you seek, I shall grant. The food of the Zhu residents is tainted. I shall not partake, lest it choke me. That day, within the Qianglin garden, fragrant breezes mingled with the shadows of elegant coiffures, while the sounds of silk strings and bamboo flutes filled the air without end. The grand princess sat upon the phoenix throne, majestic and dignified. I brought Xianxia to the banquet, where he stood out among the nobles in his shabby state, attempting to strike up conversations but only receiving perfunctory replies and avoidance. As the feast reached its peak, the music of strings and bamboo suddenly ceased. Everyone looked up in astonishment, only to see my father, Zhu Daoming, leading Aunt Lu and Zhu Huan, striding in openly and unashamedly. They instantly drew all the scornful and astonished gazes. How dare a concubine step into the main hall? An old censor immediately flicked his sleeve and muttered in disapproval, yet Zhu Huan held her head high, shielding her belly with her hand. I am carrying the legitimate heir of the Marquis's household. Who dares to stop me? This belly is my hope. The scene was instantly plunged into awkwardness and chaos. Xianxia's face turned deathly pale, wishing he could find a crack in the ground to crawl into. At that moment, the princess slowly rose to her feet and announced in a clear voice, on this flower festival, I have the honor of welcoming back a hero of our great Yong, a dear friend we thought had perished for our nation. All eyes immediately turned toward the entrance. The sound of a wheelchair rolling across the floor came through clearly. A man dressed in black, with a thin blanket draped over his knees, held a swaddled infant securely in his arms as he was slowly pushed in by an attendant. His face was gaunt, crisscrossed with scars, but his eyes alone shone with a piercing intensity. Yian, General Fang, didn't he pass away 3 years ago? The entire hall erupted in a clamor like boiling water. The jade cup in my father's hand fell to the ground with a sharp crack. Fu Yanxiu abruptly stood up, knocking over the small table and sending fruit dishes scattering across the floor. Cousin Fang Yian's gaze slowly swept over them, his voice low yet striking like a thunderbolt that shattered all false peace. Uncle, brother-in-law, surprised to see me still alive, aren't you? After all, it was you who pushed me off Eagle's Beak Cliff with your own hands back then. An absolute dead silence enveloped Chonglin Garden. All eyes were fixed on Zhu Daoming and Fu Yanxiu, whose faces had turned ashen. The voice of the Grand Princess broke the suffocating silence. General Zhu, Marquis of Loyalty and Valor, do you have anything to say in response to these accusations? Before either of them could speak, Zhu Huan leaped forward first. Do not slander us with baseless accusations. Brother Yian didn't even bother to look at her, a daughter of a concubine. What right do you have to speak so arrogantly here? Zhu Huan was stung by Fang Yian's words, daughter of a concubine, and jumped to her feet. Losing all reason, she shrieked, don't you dare slander me. What concubine? It was my mother who married father first. It was your Fang family who bullied others with your power. I should have been the legitimate eldest daughter of the Zhu family. Her cry was like a thunderclap, tearing open the filthy scandal that the Zhu family had carefully concealed for years. The entire hall erupted in an uproar, with all eyes instantly fixed on her and Zhu Daoming, whose face had drastically changed. Huana, shut your mouth, Zhu Daoming sternly shouted to stop her, but it was already too late. Brother Yian sat in his wheelchair, letting out a cold laugh. Though his voice was not loud, it clearly reached everyone's ears. Marry first. Are you talking about that minor guerrilla General Zhu Daoming under my grandfather's command, who concealed the fact that he already had a wife, Lu, in the countryside, and deceitfully married my aunt, the legitimate daughter of the Fang family? Are you referring to the fact that he used my aunt's generous dowry to secretly support his so-called first wife and illegitimate daughter in the northern borderlands year after year? Or are you talking about how, when my aunt Lady Fang was bedridden and frail, he couldn't wait to elevate his mistress to the status of the legitimate wife? If I hadn't taken up a spear and gone to your father to warn him, saying, if you do this today, I will make sure the entire capital knows your true face, you wouldn't be a stepdaughter now, you'd be the legitimate daughter who usurped the nest. You're lying, you're lying. Zhu Huan trembled all over, shouting in vain. The hall had already erupted into chaos. The nobles exchanged looks of shock and disdain, their whispers rising like a tide. Heavens, so that's what happened, abandoning his wife to marry another, deceiving the Fang family's legitimate daughter, using the dowry of the legal wife to support a mistress and an illegitimate daughter. How utterly shameless. No wonder General Fang distanced himself from him back then. Zhu Daoming's face turned ashen as he tried to salvage the situation. Enough, Yian. You're still severely injured and not in your right mind. Don't spout nonsense here and be manipulated by villains. He turned to the crowd, forcing a calm demeanor as he clasped his hands. My daughter spoke out of ignorance, and the young general is likely affected by his severe injuries. So his words are nothing but baseless speculation. Please don't take them seriously. Today is the flower festival. Let's not allow such groundless talk to spoil everyone's enjoyment. Just at that moment, the gentle tinkling of jade ornaments announced the arrival of the emperor and empress in their ceremonial procession. The emperor raised an eyebrow with keen interest and inquired, "Oh, such a lively debate, what are my ministers arguing about?" My father and Fu Yanxiu forced themselves to remain composed, bowing deeply toward the imperial throne. Their voices rang out firm and resolute, attempting to overwhelm with their presence. Your Majesty, please judge wisely. The military reports from the battle in the northern desert 3 years ago were entirely truthful. When reinforcements arrived at Eagle's Beak Cliff, General Fang and the young general had already sacrificed their lives for the country. It was only through our bloody struggle that we managed to turn the tide, forcing Beijiao to cede cities and sue for peace. The young general's survival is indeed a joyous matter, but it is likely that his severe injuries have clouded his mind. Or perhaps he has been misled by treacherous individuals, leading him to speak nonsense and slander loyal subjects. The Grand Princess personally pushed my cousin's wheelchair before the Emperor. Though his face was pale, his gaze was sharp and penetrating, word by word. The bloody truth of Eagle's Beak Cliff from that year was laid bare. How they fell into an ambush due to false intelligence, how his maternal grandfather fought to the last moment. How the Northern Desert Army fought back in a desperate situation and inflicted heavy losses on the enemy, and how, after the so-called reinforcements arrived, instead of rescuing them, they forced the remnants of the Fang family army to the edge of the cliff and unleashed a volley of arrows to cover up their crimes of delaying military operations and falsely claiming military merits. He raised his right arm, which was clearly unable to exert any force. This arm of mine was pierced by an arrow from Fu Yanxiu, my good brother-in-law, and I fell off the cliff. If not for the herbalist at the bottom of the cliff who saved me, I would have long been reduced to bones and ashes. Absurd, utter nonsense. Zhu Daoming interrupted with a hoarse, desperate cry, "Your Majesty!" These are all his one-sided claims. The situation was chaotic at the time. Where is the evidence, the witnesses? How can he slander a meritorious servant of the state with nothing but empty words? Fu Yanxiu hastily chimed in. Exactly, Your Majesty. He is clearly doing this to stand up for Zhu Yang and take revenge on your humble servant. His intentions are utterly despicable. I nearly laughed out loud. But then I saw my concubine mother, Auntie Lu, suddenly throw herself to the ground, wailing, "Your Majesty, this humble woman can testify. I was there at the time. And every word the Grand General and the Marquis said is true. It is General Fang who is making false accusations." I looked at her coldly, my tone laced with sarcasm. "You, a woman confined to the inner chambers, how could you testify about frontline military affairs? Do you even think you're worthy?" Just as they thought there was no evidence left and secretly breathed a sigh of relief, I took a deep breath, pulled out a small bundle tightly wrapped in oilcloth from my chest, and raised it high. "Did you really think I had no evidence?" My voice was calm, yet each word struck like a hammer. "In these past few days, I found this item in the secret compartment of Fu Yanxiu's study. Then, taking advantage of the family banquet, I ordered a maid to sneak into my father's study and found another copy." My gaze swept over the two of them, their faces ashen with dread. "It seems that you two do not fully trust each other either, each needing to keep a hold on the other's secrets to feel secure in working together." The Emperor picked up one letter, while the Empress took another. After a brief glance, both their expressions darkened. The letters not only contained schemes to delay military operations and frame comrades, but also cold-blooded plans to divide military achievements and eliminate potential threats. Faced with such irrefutable evidence, Fu Yanxiu, in a moment of despair, resorted to the behavior of a street scoundrel, pointing at his father-in-law and shouting, "Zhu Daoming, you shameless old thief! If it weren't for your reckless pursuit of glory back then, how could this have happened?" Zhu Daoming, his eyes wide with fury, shot back, "Silence, you ungrateful jackal! If it weren't for my promotion, how could you have reached this position today? That arrow was clearly shot by you, in the Golden Hall." Two former meritorious officials tore at each other like mad dogs. The entire court of civil and military officials fell into a deathly silence, with only their ugly roars echoing through the air. When they had cursed themselves hoarse and were panting for breath, I slowly stepped forward and said, "Your Majesty, Your Highness, have you noticed that these letters, including the secret missive Brother Yian brought back, all carry a faint, peculiar fragrance?" The Emperor frowned and handed the letter to the attendant beside him, instructing him to have the Imperial physician examine it. The Empress also nodded slightly. "This incense is called Dream Datura. It is not from our dynasty but is a secret formula of the Northern Zhao royal family. Its fragrance is long-lasting and does not fade for years." My gaze turned toward Madame Lu, who was already trembling like a sieve. coincidentally. This scent is exactly the same as the incense my dear stepmother and sister Zhu Huan have always been so fond of. You're lying, Zhu Huan screamed, but I no longer looked at her, only staring at Lu Yunjiao. Do you know why they received the wrong intelligence back then? It was all you. Taking advantage of your close access, you secretly swapped the real military report. You delayed the timing by 3 days. Seeing the matter completely exposed, Lu Yunjiao no longer resembled the gentle, water-like concubine she had been by father's side in the past. The panic on her face gradually twisted into a strange, eerie madness. She suddenly raised her head and let out a sharp, bone-chilling laugh. They all say I'm infatuated. How could I have been infatuated for years with Zhu Daoming, that heartless, faithless scoundrel? What an absolute joke. She glanced around at the crowd, her eyes filled with twisted satisfaction. That's right. I was the one who altered those intelligence reports. I've always been a spy planted here by Beijiao. Watching you tear each other apart has been pure delight. A triumphant, savage grin spread across her face. What a pity, just a little more. For 3 years, your northern defenses have been hollowed out. When my army returns, from the throne, the emperor, who had been watching coldly all along, let out a faint, contemptuous chuckle, cutting off her frenzied delusions. Idiot, the emperor's voice was not loud, yet it carried the weight of thunder. Are you still lost in such a daydream? This morning, an urgent military dispatch arrived from 800 miles away. Your northern Zhao's main forces were completely annihilated 3 days ago in the Blackwater River Valley. Your third prince is now in shackles, on his way to the capital. The wild laughter on Lu Yunjiao's face instantly froze, twisting into an expression of utter horror and disbelief. Her mouth hung open, but no sound could escape. Her entire body went limp, as if all her bones had been pulled out. Within the golden hall, a deathly silence fell. Only the bloody scent of truth and the chill of a conspiracy exposed lingered in the air. Lu Yunjiao's wails were drowned out by the rough dragging of the guards. Grand General Zhu Daoming, for deceiving the emperor, colluding with the enemy, and committing treason, his crimes are unforgivable. He is stripped of his rank and exiled to Ninguta, never to be recalled. Loyal and brave Marquis Fu Yanxiu, for conspiring against his comrades, falsely claiming military merits, his crimes are tantamount to rebellion. He is stripped of his title, reduced to a commoner, and his family property is confiscated. The decree struck like a final verdict, causing Fu Yanxiu to stagger violently, his face ashen and lifeless. Zhu Huan threw herself onto him, weeping uncontrollably, whether for his downfall or her own future, no one could tell. Suddenly, Fu Yanxiu seized Zhu Huan. A final glimmer of madness flashing in his lifeless eyes. Struggling, he crawled forward 2 steps and shouted hoarsely toward the imperial throne, "Your Majesty, Emperor, my Fu ancestors rendered great service to the nation, deserving a place in the imperial ancestral temple. The late emperor once personally promised that the Fu family's noble title would never be revoked as long as the bloodline continued and there were successors. Does that promise still hold?" The emperor's gaze darkened slightly, and after a moment, he slowly nodded. The late emperor did indeed grant such a favor. However, you no longer have a son. I do, Fu Yanxiu, as if grasping at the last straw, cried out with a voice cracking from excitement, "Zhu Huan, the child she carries is my flesh and blood. This is my son. The Fu family bloodline is not broken." A scornful laugh came from the platform, though it was unclear which official spoke. Fu Yanxiu, how do you know the child in her womb is definitely a boy? What if it's a daughter? What then? I still have one. Driven to the brink and having lost all reason, Fu Yanxiu blurted out in a roar, "Mingyi, I still have Mingyi. Mingyi is my own son. He is the son Huan and I had 8 years ago while stationed at the border. He is the seed of my Fu family. He has the right to inherit the title. 8 years ago, guarding the border." I laughed. "So that's how it is. No wonder Marquis Fu is so deeply devoted to my half-sister. It turns out the methods of mother and daughter are truly passed down through the same lineage, exactly alike." Fu Yanxiu, at this moment, had no time to care about shame. His eyes were fixed only on that illusory title of nobility. He kowtowed repeatedly toward the imperial throne, his forehead instantly turning bruised and purple. "I beg your majesty for mercy. Mingyi is my own son, his bloodline is unquestionable. I beg your majesty to allow him to inherit the title, to continue the lineage of my Fu family." His desperate confession completely tore away the last shred of decency. At that moment, a servant suddenly came to report from outside the hall. He was let in by the guards, soaked to the bone. Stumbling and crawling to Fu Yanxiu, his voice choked with tears. "Master, master, it's terrible. Young Master Mingyi at the academy got into an argument with someone, accidentally fell into the koi pond. When they pulled him out, he was already gone." "What?" Fu Yanxiu felt as if struck by lightning, his entire body stiffening abruptly, the faint, mad glimmer that had ignited because of his son instantly extinguished, his face turning completely ashen, his lips trembled, but no sound came out. He turned his head stiffly, his gaze fixed like a nail on Zhu Huan's slightly swollen belly, like a dying beast catching sight of its last drop of blood. At that moment, the elderly imperial physician, who had been carefully examining the secret letters, finally stepped forward. "Your Majesty, I have just meticulously inspected these letters and the lingering fragrance on Lord Fu and Lord Zhu. This scent is indeed called Dream Datura, and it is no ordinary exotic spice. While it can indeed enhance pleasure and induce passion when used by women, if men are exposed to it over a long period or in excessive amounts, its cold and yin nature can severely damage their vital essence, leading to infertility." A flicker of understanding and amusement passed through the emperor's eyes as he remarked calmly, "Oh, in that case, my dear minister, please carefully examine Lord Fu's pulse and get to the bottom of this." Fu Yanxiu was so shaken to the core at that moment that he even forgot to resist. The imperial physician placed his fingertips on Fu's wrist. After a moment, he withdrew his hand with a grave expression and slowly shook his head toward the imperial throne. "Your Majesty, Lord Fu's pulse is deep, sluggish, and weak. The signs of depleted kidney essence are not of recent origin. In my humble opinion, Lord Fu's condition of infertility has persisted for at least half a year." Half a year. My voice was not loud, but it was enough for everyone to hear clearly. Counting the days, half a year ago, wasn't that precisely when Aunt Lu, under the pretense of caring for her daughter, was brought to the capital and moved into the Zhu family's residence? "Phut!" I finally couldn't hold back and burst into laughter, the sound piercingly sharp in the grand hall. Fu Yanxiu was like a powder keg ignited, all his despair, rage, and shame erupting violently in that moment. His eyes were bloodshot, and with a beast-like roar, he viciously kicked Zhu Huan in the stomach. "You wretch, you're just like your venomous mother. Both of you are poisonous snakes out to harm me, whose bastard is in your belly." Caught off guard, Zhu Huan let out a sharp cry as she fell to the ground, a shocking pool of blood instantly spreading beneath her. She curled up in agony, reaching out in vain to grasp the hem of Fu Yanxiu's robe. "Husband, husband, don't listen to their provocations, this is our child." But Fu Yanxiu seemed drained of all strength. He stared at the pool of blood, then at his own trembling hands. Staggering backward with hollow eyes, muttering over and over, "It's over, all over, everything is gone." The hall was in complete disarray. At that moment, the infant, who had been quietly nestled in Yian's brother's arms, seemed startled by the bloodshed and madness, and suddenly burst into loud cries. My heart tightened, and I immediately stepped forward, carefully taking the child wrapped in a brocade swaddle from my brother's hands. I gently cradled the baby in my arms and whispered softly, "Hush, don't be afraid, Auntie is here." With practiced ease, I patted and soothed the child, who gradually stopped crying and stared at me with a pair of dark, bright eyes. Fu Yanxiu suddenly raised his head, his clouded eyes fixed intently on the child in my arms. He seemed to have found a lifeline, struggling to get up and staggering forward to snatch it. "This face is clearly my Hong'er, isn't it? Hong'er isn't dead. Give him back to me, return him to me." I sidestepped his filthy hands, holding the child tightly, and watched his frenzied state with a cold gaze. "Fu Yanxiu, have you gone mad? My Hong'er died long ago under the neglect and cold treatment of your Marquis's household. Have you forgotten? I looked down at the jade-like, adorable infant in my arms, my tone shifting to firmness and pride. This is an orphan adopted by Brother Yian at the border, a child of the Fang family. He is the heir personally appointed by His Majesty to inherit the Fang family's title in the future. You're lying, you're deceiving me. Fu Yanxiu refused to listen, stubbornly roaring, those eyes, that profile. It's clearly my Honga, you're all conspiring to trick me. No matter how much he clamored, the emperor seated upon the throne had already spoken, his voice authoritative. Settling the matter once and for all, by our decree, the case of the Northern Desert 3 years ago has now been thoroughly investigated, and it was Zhu Daoming and Fu Yanxiu who deceived the throne and framed the loyal and righteous. Immediately clear the names of General Fang and General Fang Yian, posthumously bestow honorary titles, and grant them a place in the Imperial Ancestral Temple. The loyalty and sacrifice of the Fang family are evident to heaven and earth. General Fang Yian, unparalleled in loyalty and bravery, disabled in body but unyielding in spirit, is hereby specially granted the title of Dingbeihu, Marquis of Northern Stability, to be inherited in perpetuity. His adopted son is granted the name Fang Chengji, recognized as a true descendant of the Fang family, and shall enjoy the honor of being the heir to the Marquis's estate. With the imperial decree issued, all matters were settled. Fu Yanxiu seemed to have been drained of his last ounce of strength. Collapsing completely to the ground, his eyes were hollow as he stared at the child in my arms, the child who represented the future and hope of the Fang family, unable to utter a single sound. Glory belongs to the loyal souls. Justice may be delayed, but it always arrives. And some people can only fall into the abyss they themselves created, consumed by endless regret and despair. The golden hall finally fell completely silent, holding the warm little body in my arms, feeling his steady breathing. My tightly wound heartstrings finally relaxed a little. No one knew that every step I had taken was like treading on thin ice. My insistence on entering the palace back then was not entirely to escape the suffocating oppression in the mansion, also because, at that time, I received a blood-stained secret letter, desperately sent back by a spy planted in Beijiao. The vague yet deadly clues on it coiled around my reason like a venomous snake. The letter stated that the fatal blows delivered at the bottom of the cliff bore the familiar marks of Central Plains military-issue blades, and the source of the erroneous military report faintly pointed to my closest kin, my father and my husband. I was reluctant to believe it for a long time, even hoping that the secret letter was a scheme by the enemy state to sow discord, until the day I gave birth, when I was in critical condition from a hemorrhage. They were eager to get rid of the mother and keep the child, even allowing Zhu Huan to use that poison tonic. It was then that I finally saw clearly a wolf's heart can never be warmed, so I presented the secret letter to His Majesty, offering myself as a pawn in the game, and begged His Majesty to allow me to direct this play of luring the enemy into a trap. The danger on the day of childbirth was real, and Honga's serious illness was also real, but Honga did not die young that day. His faint breath was not entirely feigned. The imperial physician truly did his utmost to save his life. I took the opportunity to give him the turtle breath feigned death medicine personally bestowed by His Majesty, that very night. The secret guards arranged by the emperor escorted him out of the Marquis's residence and handed him over to the trusted subordinate sent by Brother Yian, in the dead of night, when no one was around. The nanny replaced him with a stillborn infant that had been prepared long in advance. The cold coffin held nothing more than a carefully arranged substitute. As for me, I had to remain in this living hell, playing the role of one who had lost a beloved child, heartbroken and utterly disillusioned. They even deliberately weakened the security of the Listening Rain Pavilion, tacitly allowing Zhu Huan to take charge of the household, making them think I had completely lost power and letting their guard down. Sure enough, they became so carried away with their success that they even dared to let the newly arrived insiders come and go freely in such an important place as the study. This gave Hongxiu the opportunity to take advantage of the chaos and fish out the original copies of those secret letters they kept to guard against each other but had no choice but to retain. At the same time, I never let down my guard against Aunt Lu and her daughter. Their peculiar fondness for exotic fragrances and certain unique dietary preferences subtly align with the habits of the northern Zhao nobility as described by the spies, yet I only harbored suspicions, lacking any concrete evidence. It wasn't until 3 days ago, when the remnants of Yian's brother's forces set an ambush in the Blackwater River Valley, decisively defeating the remaining northern Zhao army and capturing their third prince, under severe torture. He finally confessed that Lu Yunjiao was not the orphaned child of a border general at all, but a carefully cultivated sleeper agent from the northern Zhao royal family, sent into the Central Plains many years ago. The goal is to infiltrate the general's households, seize the opportunity to steal military intelligence, and create chaos. At this point, all the clues are connected. And the whole truth is revealed. I let out a long sigh of relief, as if a heavy burden had been lifted, and held the bewildered Xianxia in my arms even tighter. This risky game, where I used myself as bait and my own flesh and blood as a pawn, has finally been won. In the dark, damp depths of the Imperial prison, I stood before the specially made cell, holding a food box. My mother-in-law was curled up on the moldy straw, her once meticulously styled hair bun was now a tangled mess. And her expensive silk clothes were filthy, emitting a foul odor mixed with the stench of blood. Hearing footsteps, her clouded eyes shifted. Recognizing me, she immediately let out a hoarse, threatening growl from her throat. "Mother-in-law," my voice was soft, like a spring breeze brushing by. "It's been a few days. And you've grown thinner. I came today because I was afraid you might be cut off from news in prison, so I thought I'd share a few fresh stories with you to pass the time." I spoke unhurriedly, recounting everything that had happened in the Golden Hall, how Fu Yanxiu had gone mad and lost his title, how Zhu Huan had been kicked and miscarried, dying on the spot, how Lu Yunjiao had been exposed as a spy, and how Mingyi had accidentally drowned. One by one, incident by incident, I told her in detail. Her breathing grew increasingly rapid, her withered chest heaving violently. Suddenly, her eyes widened, and she rasped, You venomous woman, you're lying, whether it's nonsense or not, you know in your heart." I smiled faintly. "Oh, right, and one more important thing. His Majesty has issued an edict to clear the Fang family's name, posthumously honor my grandfather and uncle, and bestow upon my brother the title of Marquis of Northern Pacification, hereditary and non-revocable. Our Fang family has a future again. Let me tell you secretly. The heir of the Fang family is Hong'er. He has now taken the surname Fang." But she suddenly spat out a mouthful of dark red blood, splattering it on the grimy wall. Her whole body convulsed as she collapsed back into the straw pile, her eyes glazed over, leaving only desperate whimpers. I signaled the jailer to open the cell door and personally brought out a bowl of thick, dark medicinal brew. "Mother-in-law, please don't be upset. Anger harms the body." I crouched down, nearly meeting her eye level, my tone filled with utmost concern. "You are elderly and frail, and after suffering such a blow, your daughter-in-law truly feels for you. This is ginseng soup specially brewed for you, made with the finest aged mountain ginseng. It will surely ensure you live a long life and remain clear-headed every day." In that soup, I had mixed enough bitter coptis to break the heart, while it truly served to sustain life. It also ensured one remained awake to endure every ounce of suffering. With my own hands, I spoon-fed that intensely bitter broth into her resisting mouth, making sure not a single drop was left. From then on, this specially prepared ginseng soup would be delivered punctually every day, the jailer reported back. At first, Fu Wangxia cursed daily, then she frantically clawed at the prison walls with her nails until her fingers were mangled, flesh torn, and bones exposed, eventually breaking completely. Later on, only unconscious, guttural groans from deep within her throat remained, but her eyes, forced open by the drug's effects, remained wide awake, enduring the torment of an endless hell. As for Fu Yanxiu, how could I let him die so easily? I want him to live consciously, with nothing left, to live and see the Fu family bloodline completely severed, to live and watch the title he values as his life stripped away by a single imperial decree. To live to see him fall from the clouds, reduced to a beggar bullied by everyone on the streets, dragging his broken body, struggling to survive in the mud, until many years later, at the formal investiture ceremony of the heir to the Marquis of Northern Pacification, the honor guard was magnificent, and guests gathered like clouds. My Xianxia, now grown into a handsome young man, strides confidently toward his glory. Suddenly, he halted his steps and looked down at the filthy, foul-smelling beggar curled up in the shadows beneath the steps. The beggar seemed to sense something as well, lifting his clouded eyes to gaze dully at him. Xianxia's lips curved into a carefree, radiant smile, like the most dazzling sunlight. He lifted his foot and mercilessly stepped over the beggar's outstretched, withered branch-like wrist. He quickly ascended the high steps, coming to stand before me, his voice clear and bright, carrying the sharpness and pride unique to a young man. Mother. Look, he declared brightly, as if merely stepping over a bothersome stone, how steady is your child on these steps. I looked at him, at the figure curled up in pain and humiliation at the foot of the steps, and slowly let a smile spread across my face. Steady, I murmured softly. My son walks a path that is broad and leads straight to the heavens. After hearing the story above, what are your thoughts? Feel free to share your opinions in the comments section. Looking forward to hearing from you. If you liked this story, don't forget to like it, share it, and subscribe to my channel. See you next time.